I do love a pause after you present commercials. Like confidently present the commercials, the numbers, and then pause and don't say anything until the other person gives their reaction.
Welcome to Rep Matters, a podcast for sales professionals who are eager to build their business acumen and become top performers. In each episode, your hosts, Zoya Segelbacher and Caroline Jones, explore the real-life experiences, obstacles, and triumphs of salespeople. With an emphasis on authenticity and storytelling, listeners gain valuable insights into the strategies, mindsets, and skills that drive success in sales. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Rep Matters. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Zoya.
And this episode is brought to you by Marketers in Demand. Marketers in Demand has in-depth videos, podcasts, and articles from some of B2B's most in-demand marketers. So, a couple of months ago, a former coworker and friend of mine, Alyssa Kropp, posted on LinkedIn about a study conducted by Bain Consulting that names centeredness as the character trait that is most important for inspiring others. She wrote that centered people are confident, grounded, aware, secure, consistent, and quietly calm. I immediately pictured the person we're going to be speaking with today when I read this. She has been in sales for 11 years, selling both as an individual contributor and recently as a team lead. I learned so much from her when we were sellers together at Electric, and I'm so excited to have this conversation today with my friend, Maureen Gallagher. Mo, thank you so much for joining us today on Rep Matters.
Thank you so much. What an intro. I really appreciate that. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we are so excited to get into it. And I'm dying to learn more about centeredness in sales specifically. Before we do, though, just to kind of like orient our audience, and, you know, I love your background. As Caroline said, 11 years, you've been at really impressive companies like LinkedIn, like Electric, like Andela. To start with, can you walk us through how you ended up in sales?
Yeah, that's kind of funny. I honestly got super lucky. I was 1 in a million where I was not 1 in a million out of college, didn't know what I wanted to do. I'd just gotten back from a year in Korea, and I Googled best companies to work for in Chicago. And I was on their websites, and I sent in my application, my resume, to one that I guess required very, very, very little experience, and actually got an interview, and I was so excited, and I was like, I will do anything to get this job. The company was Morningstar, which was a great company to work for, but I thought that they were Morningstar, the veggie burgers. I don't know if you've ever had like their like veggie corn dogs, mini corn dogs, which I was a fan of, and quickly learned that they were actually financial services. So I had to do a lot of research on the company, but ultimately, thankfully, they didn't require too much financial background. And I got the role, and I was there for 3 years.
So was it the company being considered a great company, the part that was exciting to you, or was there something that attracted you to sales specifically?
I had nothing. I had no experience with sales. I really did not even know what that was. It was just the company. It was just like, it was rated a cool place to work. And I was like, great. Like, what kind of job can you give me? And selling their newsletters was apparently the job that they wanted to open up. So I guess I am competitive, and like, I liked the job right away and was kind of like, all right, like, is this sales? It seems like you're just talking to people. So it was a natural fit, but it just kind of fell into my lap.
Awesome.
That's awesome. So you went from Morningstar. I saw that you were also at LinkedIn for about 3 years. We share some mutual connections from LinkedIn. And then you had some other interesting stops, but you made your way to Electric. with Caroline. And I've heard really interesting, exciting things about your like boldness, specifically your boldness with travel. Can you tell us how you approached that? It sounds like you have like a bit of a digital nomad life, how you approach that, how you made that work, and then how you make it work continuously, right? Like with sales and time zones and things like that.
Yeah, I've always loved to travel. I've lived abroad a couple times. And during the pandemic, I gave up my lease in New York and at the time could work from wherever. So I set out to travel for 3 months and just picked 3 different places where I could go live for a month, get an Airbnb and do my job, and then just continue doing that for about a year and a half. I still don't have a full annual lease and kind of in flux or in motion at the currently as well, but I loved it. I think I did pick places that were a little bit easier to work from. Like South America is actually great. You can wake up and work out and have a nice morning, start your day at 10 or 11 and work a little bit later. And people don't go out for dinner there until much later anyway. So it just works great. Plus, it's summer when it's winter in New York, which is an added bonus. And I think just being really happy and turned on and excited about my life outside of work brought that energy and happiness into my day-to-day at Electric, which ultimately led to my success. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have been able to do that. And also, yeah, I've met so many people along the way and I've learned so much about myself. But I highly recommend it if, your company or your lifestyle allows it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people say, I want to travel more, or like, I love traveling, or like when people post about their like significant other. This stuff kind of makes me roll my eyes. And it's like, my travel buddy. It's like, you love to travel, but you're only traveling, maybe when you have a vacation. And of course, not everybody can pack up their stuff and head out. You've made many sacrifices to be able to do that. But what I love about your approach is you're not waiting. I think COVID left all of us with many lessons, but something that has always been part of your DNA made itself manifest during COVID, where you were like, what am I waiting for? Like, and I can continue to do a great job and do what I love today without waiting for retirement or waiting for my next like 1 week vacation. It's not to say that
That's
it's
so
easy,
true.
but you're actually chasing it like in the moment in tandem with your full-time work.
I think I've always been good at that, at just kind of taking the opportunity when it presents itself. But I think COVID also instilled a little bit of fear in me of like, I haven't been able to travel in a couple of years. I've been, stuck in my apartment. And once I was given, the green light to be able to get on a plane again, I was like, let me do this now, because I was afraid that maybe I wouldn't be able to again.
Yeah. There was a initial bonding I think you and I had when we started at Electric. We were in onboarding, and you mentioned this earlier, living in Korea. Can you tell us a little bit about your professional experience there and maybe what you learned then that has impacted the way that you sell today?
Yeah, so much. Like when I say Morningstar was my first sales job, that was my first, air quote sales job. But Korea, I think about teaching English there is definitely the start of sales. And I think a lot of teachers can probably attest to this, that, you're selling knowledge in front of the hardest audience, a group of, 30 middle schoolers, and you need to hold their attention and get them excited about, speaking English. So I take a lot of that into my sales process today. And, even when people join my demos to talk about IT, it's my mission to like make them excited and to walk away with a feeling like, oh, I want to learn more about that. And that was really my goal as an English teacher too. I wasn't trained in education, and the Korean government hired me, bless them, to teach at this middle school outside of Seoul. And I was the only person who spoke English Monday through Friday. So I really had to be creative and self-reliant in figuring out how am I going to fill these classes and what am I going to teach, what's going to get across. And I think just like my confidence, like standing in front of a classroom, not really knowing what I was doing and having to just hold my own and figure it out and be comfortable with being uncomfortable has really helped my success in sales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see so many parallels. Like the confidence centeredness, might I say, that you have puts everyone at ease. Even prospects want to know when we're running a call that we're in charge. Like that we're not showing like desperation or some kind of like need for them to act a certain way, that we're kind of centered and grounded in what we're doing. And kids, I don't teach kids, but kids can sense when you're off balance too. So you had to project that type of energy in order to manage the classroom, I would imagine.
Did you have any like stumbling or lessons like for yourself where you were like, okay, let's not do that again?
Absolutely. There were definitely lessons or where I thought it was going to take the full 45 minutes. You know, they finish it in 15. I'm like, what are we going to do now? Like, that's where we listened to a lot of Taylor Swift and Justin Bieber YouTube videos and filled in the blanks of the words of Love Story.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
You were
So
building
creative.
little Swifties 10 years ago. I feel like the caliber of Taylor Swift fans maybe has changed in the past decade, but you planted the seed. And I can attest, any karaoke box in Asia has every Taylor Swift song you could possibly want. So know that your
You're
students are
welcome.
somewhere singing their little hearts out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that kind of like spontaneity is also kind of important, right? I think especially when you're new in sales, and I think a lot of our listeners are earlier career or thinking about maybe changing careers into sales, you can kind of panic if you're not really sure where to go next, especially if you're doing your job and listening very closely to what the other person is saying. There's a little bit of improv, like a little bit of creativity that you have to be able to bring into the sale and into the conversation. At least for me teaching English, I teach it to adults now. Like, I always lean on asking them another question. Was that part of your strategy too when you're in the classroom? Like, when your goal is to get someone to speak English and like output is the main goal, bouncing back with the open-ended question is always a tool that I rely on. And I think that reflects in sales too.
Yep. Such a good point. Definitely.
So we've talked about the centeredness piece. Caroline, I don't know if you want to elaborate more on it before we pass it back to Mo, because I'm really curious about this study too. But Mo, what I want to hear from you is like, were you always like this? Did you adjust your style to be centered and grounded? How'd you get
Do you agree with my assessment, Mo? That's my first question.
I mean, I have to think about it more. I love that that's the perception. I don't always feel so centered, but I think a little bit it's just maybe authenticity. I'm not trying to be anything different in sales. And that has maybe changed, or my confidence around it has changed. I think when I first got into sales and you're on this open floor plan and there's a lot of guys on phones who are so loud, I was like, this doesn't feel like me. And I kind of just stuck with it and thankfully found like cultures that weren't so much like that. Or maybe I think sales has maybe changed a little bit and shifted away from that being the like ideal sales environment, but just kind of being myself on the phone and, you know, at work in general, like bringing my whole self to work has always been something that I've been doing.
Yeah, staying true to your voice is so hard when there is kind of pressure maybe to emulate how other people are getting it done. You have such a unique style, I think. And I remember at Electric, like, our manager would be sending Maureen's call tapes out, and the message is like, be like Mo. Like, it didn't matter if my memory is, it didn't matter if you were on the top of the leaderboard or if you were still on your way there. Your approach was consistent. You were calm, you were measured, you asked great questions. There were pauses that a lot of reps would never have allowed in their calls because they were too busy asking the questions, myself included, and talking way too much, getting our gong ratio a little too high, right, Zoya? But Mo, like, pause, think, no problem. Is that the same way that you feel like you are in real life too?
It is. I actually love a pause, especially a long one that gets people talking. And I do think people, maybe because of giving them the time to talk, do open up and naturally talk more to me, or maybe I'm just a good listener, ask questions. But I do think that both in my job and outside of my job, I'm pretty consistent there.
Yeah. And by the way, the pauses came after really strong questioning. Like, it's not that you were calm and not challenging the prospect or asking for what you needed for the next step of the sales cycle or making a strong recommendation. Like, the pause is so strong after a really effective use of words, I think. Do you have any, like, of course it depends on the sale and the timing of the deal, but do you have any questions or methods that you particularly lean on as a salesperson that you think are particularly effective?
So I do love a pause after you present commercials, like confidently present the commercials, the numbers, and then pause and don't say anything until the other person gives their reaction. One of my favorite parts of the sales cycle. And it's interesting. Like, I can think of deals that I've closed where I was like, oh, is this going to be too expensive for them? And then, they showed their reaction and I was like, yes, like I got it. Yeah, it's super fun.
So you mentioned you're competitive too. And I love thinking about the ways that people are competitive, because even with that, right, you're talking about, I deliver the commercials, I'm silent, and then, they have the reaction that you're hoping for, and you have this like internal celebration. But I've been on like teams of hiring managers. I've been a hiring manager. And sometimes, like, when we're looking for that competitive personality type, it can be easy to look for the person who's played sports or the person who had some other job that, like, society thinks, oh, like, that's obviously like a very competitive job. I guess first question, I don't know this about you. When you think about your competitive nature, does that come from sports or some of the more like stereotypical competitive experiences, or does it express itself in ways that people might not think?
Good question. I have to think about that. I mean, I have always played sports, and someone asked me recently, do you like to win or do you like to not lose? And I've been thinking about that in myself. I think it varies. I don't know. I think it's something that you have from birth, just being competitive, and that eventually leads to sports, which eventually leads to, other things. I will say I recently started playing tennis, and I know I'm competitive, but for some reason, like, tennis has ignited something in me that's like so competitive that I am like, is this helping? Oh.
Are you like smashing rackets?
Not yet, but yeah, definitely taking a little bit of a break from it.
And you're, as always, blazing a trail different from others, because forgive me in 3026 when this is listened to, but currently pickleball, I hear, is like the American pastime.
I know.
So
I actually have
you're
never
not doing
played pickleball, but
tennis.
I'm going to love it. Maybe that's like a less competitive version of tennis that I should probably get into.
Yeah. Have you done pickleball, Zoya?
No, I was a hater on it for a little bit. Just like counterculture. Like I was like, everybody's playing this. I'd never heard of it. And like overnight, like everyone said it as if like they'd been doing it for forever. And so I had like a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, like, no, I'm not doing it. No, I'm open to it. I'll play pickleball. I feel like it's like, I don't know. Spike ball had its like moment in at least the Bay Area. So no, I'm open. I've held out for long enough. Now I feel like I'm just like missing a cultural phenomenon.
Your competitive side might come out.
Oh, it will.
But you
I'm
also,
unreasonably competitive.
yeah, we need our, especially because you're not carrying quota at the moment, Zoya, right? In enablement. So you need to.
Yeah, so it's
let
got to
that
express
fly.
itself somewhere. Mostly in board games is for me.
Which one?
We talked about those settlers.
Catan, of course.
Of course. Yeah.
Same.
I've been there.
What Maureen humbly did not mention, though, is she's also a marathon runner. So maybe some of the competition against yourself plays out with a solitary activity. What do you think of that?
I think so. I think marathon running brings out more like goal oriented, like just kind of thinking about what motivates you and, setting goals each week that are scary and then getting to those goals and then being like, all right, next week is the 16 miler. I think that marathon running and I like get most like are most in sync with goal setting, not only competition. Because I'm never going to win a marathon, and I've kind of gotten my mind around that, but figuring out what it takes to complete one.
Let's talk
Yeah,
about
like
goals a little bit. Sorry, go ahead, Zoya.
Oh, no, I was going to say like there's like personal records, personal bests, like you sound like a very goal-oriented person. So I was thinking like that. Even if you never win, right? There's always that like, how far can I push myself moment. But no,
Definitely.
Caroline, what were you going to say?
Well, it's interesting. Like 11 years in sales, I think it's pretty rare for someone to continue on this individual contributor path for that amount of time. And I love it. Like, I think it's so important for people to pursue different ways to grow their career that aren't just a pure management track. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've arranged or set career goals and reached them and how you're thinking about your next step?
Yeah. I will say, like, in the past decade, I kind of gotten like this sales wheel. Like, it was just like I had money in the table and wanted to stay in sales, and life was broken down by quarters, and that was super exciting. And to pick jobs, I really thought about two things. Am I excited to work with these people? And am I excited to talk about this product? And that excitement and where I followed it, was a good method for me. So I plan on continuing doing that. For the next 10 years, I do think I want to get into management, but I think what I want even more is to be in a leadership position where I have more visibility into the future of the company and decisions that are made and how that trickles down to the team. So I am working now with a career coach as of a couple months ago, and that's been really helpful. It's like basically, therapy for your job and thinking about what do I really want? What do I want my life to look like in 10 years? What do I want an average day in my life to look like in 5 years, 10 years, and then breaking that down into what decisions do I need to make today? So that's been a great addition to my life over the next couple of months, and I'm excited to put some of that into practice.
That's awesome. I feel like career coach is huge. I've had a career coach at one point in my life. My job was paying for it. That was cool. but I've actually never had to find one like outside of that. It was a resource. How does a person go about finding a really good career coach?
My particular career coach I found a couple of years ago when I was laid off with a riff at Andela, and they gifted us with this membership pavilion, if anyone's familiar with that, where I was assigned for a brief time someone to help me think about my next career goals. And it was honestly probably the best thing Andela ever did for me. And the entire time I was there, and I met this really great, generous person who helped me find my job at Electric. And then he reached out to me recently and was like, I'm putting together this 6-month program. I think you'd be a great fit. And it was at a really good time. And I said yes to it. So I found him sort of through this network. But I think if you're looking for a career coach, there are resources on LinkedIn. You know, Alyssa is starting her business. I hope to work with her, you know, in the near future. But I think if you ask around, you know, you can get pointed in some directions of finding good coaches.
Yeah, and ask your company to pay for it too. I mean, some companies offer, like we had Bravely at Electric. Some companies offer some kind of program or software for it, but if you can get your company to pay for this kind of professional development, that's a possibility people might not know about too.
Absolutely.
So you recently moved into a team lead role, which you were selling, and you were starting to explore this interest in taking a formal leadership role. I think you've been a leader, you know, informally for many years. What made you interested in taking that step, and what are some takeaways you had from this position?
In this case, I think I was doing the role already, but just without the title and formal recognition. So it was great to gain that, but just helping new AEs get up to speed, joining their calls, you know, making sure they were asking all the right questions, helping them with next steps, getting them the resources they needed to get over to the customer, getting questions answered. So, you know, just kind of helping them with the sales process. Unexpectedly, it turned into a lot more being a motivator than I expected, which was, you know, a pleasant surprise, but really meeting with everyone, talking about how they were feeling about things, giving them, you know, my transparent 2 cents about my experience at Electric. And I think being a resource that people could come to that is not like, you're not afraid to say anything to me that you might be afraid to say to your manager. And it's been really great. I think it has made me realize that this part of sales and leadership and management is something that excites me. So I want to continue to expand upon it.
Yeah. I think it's awesome that you got to test the waters there. So much of, I imagine, I've never been a manager, but some of that, the cheerleading is really necessary, I guess. And for you, you get to be a peer. The logistics I'm curious about. I know this varies company to company, position to position. How exactly was your quota set up, given the additional, and as much as you can say, given your additional responsibilities for the team?
So how it was structured was I was responsible for my full quota and then was responsible for allocating approximately 8 hours a week to giving back to the team. So I was keeping track of that on an Excel sheet just to, you know, hold myself accountable, but no one else was actually checking in to make sure I was doing those 8 hours. So it was a little bit experimental, but, you know, the idea was that I would still do my job while taking on additional responsibilities.
I think this is a great piece of advice for folks who are maybe an IC as an SDR or an AE. Especially if you're at an early stage company that doesn't have career pathing formalized yet, you can propose, like, I don't think I knew this 5, 6, 7 years ago. You can propose your job description. Did you create this yourself, Mo, or was this something that was created by the company?
They did create it for me. They asked if I would be interested, and then we sort of talked about what it would look like, but they did come to the table with it. But yeah, good point. I think in the future would definitely create this on my own because it was, so beneficial on both sides. And I also wouldn't have thought about this a few years ago that you can just sort of invent this and pitch it to your own leadership team.
Has managing other people or supporting others taught you anything about your own selling style, or have you learned anything that you've brought into your selling style?
Yeah, I think it's always awesome to listen to other people, especially because these folks are coming from different backgrounds and you just sort of get stuck sometimes with your regular pitch. That being on their calls, I'm like writing down like, ooh, that was a great question. So yeah, definitely. Like I've always been someone who's listened to other people's gong calls continuously just to pick up on those things, but actually joining the calls live and learning from the team was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Teaching
that's something I really...
Go ahead, Zoya.
Oh, I was just going to say that's something I really like about enablement. Like I set up my own listening quota to just listen to the team. And it's so fun to just hear like what's working in the field, what they're experimenting with, and then thinking, is this something that I would, if I were to sell again, like, how would I use this? And, am I going to bring this to the team? It's really cool when the people that you're supporting end up, being the ones to inform your decisions.
Yeah, probably
Maureen.
makes you reflect, at least for me, makes me reflect on what I could have done differently. Maybe too much at times. Very self-critical over here, but we all are in some ways. What I could have done to win a deal that I lost. So I'd love to hear from you, Mo, maybe a story about a time you missed quota, a time you lost a deal. You've had 11 years of success, but we know success in sales means a lot of loss too. Can you tell us about a time that you experienced that?
Yeah, of course. Let me pick one.
There was only one, right?
This deal popped into my mind first. Last year at the end of Q2, I had a deal that was going to get me to my quota at the end of the quarter. And I'd worked it for a while. I was excited about it, had a few people, great champion involved on their end. And then when they brought the contract to the CEO on the last day, she shut it down and it was a heartbreaker. And we had to go back to the drawing board. And we met with them after and dug in a little bit more into what the CEO cares about and how we could tie electric back to her priorities for the business. And we did win it about 5 weeks later, probably, by creating an executive summary and reframing the value to what she most cared about. So yeah, I think it reminded me that, you can't always have happy ears, even though they told me that the CEO was on board, ultimately making sure to get out in front of anything that can go wrong, especially when the final signature, wasn't involved in the sales process, to make sure that we're really dotting the I's and crossing the T's on why that person is going to sign the contract well before the last day of the quarter is a good reminder to myself for future deals.
Yeah. What could go wrong? Thinking about that. Yeah. I think that's the hardest. That's the hardest thing to nail personally. I'm also a pretty optimistic person, and I tend to gauge things by vibes sometimes. But that's actually a terrible idea, right? That's something that I consciously had to challenge myself not to do, right? Just because you're having a great conversation with someone, in that there's agreeableness and, they're respectful and giving you attention. Yeah, really figuring out biggest concerns things like that. I feel like even just being at Gong has informed the way that I sell, because we've got a lot of the data, I guess, to back it too. So it's like I'm hit over the head with it. But like biggest concern is like such an important one that like, again, we hit like everyone over the head with it. Such violent imagery.
I love this example too because one, we've all lost deals on this call, and probably everyone listening has lost something like that. I love that they came back, Mo. I think it's hard to have that long-term view, right? I mean, for your quota, it sucks, obviously, but they came back. God, that patience can really go a long way, don't you think?
Yeah. Sometimes you have to play the long game.
Yeah, I think folks like myself included, whenever I've been in a bad headspace, it's because I was looking too close to something, or like I was thinking that it was going to be a bigger deal than it was. I was looking too far. But in that situation, for you, you didn't know it at the time, but it would come back. You needed to look a little bit longer term, but they came back around. And having that kind of like calm presence, I think, can go a long way. Because you then had to continue to work with folks. So hopefully you didn't try to do some like crazy hot smoking deal to get it done on the last day of the quarter and then lose face afterwards.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like, I think I've been in a position too where I've sold to the same person at different companies.
Yeah.
So sometimes just timing isn't right. And I know, some people can be pushy in sales, and I think there's a very particular balance there, right? Like if they weren't going to buy in Q2, there was still a lot that was great about the deal and that made sense. So exactly, being patient and just helping it get across the line a little bit longer rather than like burn any bridges or make people mad at that point. And the sales world is so small. Like, will I sell to this particular company again at my next company? Like, it's very likely. So I think just making sure you have those long-term relationships and thinking about the bigger picture is so important.
That's a fantastic point, actually, because I still work, even in my enablement role now, I work really closely with SDRs. And I feel like, especially when you're an SDR, like it can be really easy to think more short-sighted. Like, I just have to get them on the phone. I just have to, get them in the meeting. And then, sometimes you'll hear people like really like persistence is key, right? But like hitting up that same person like way too many times, or like not respecting a boundary when somebody says, it's not a good time to meet and here are my reasons, and then like still pushing for it. I feel like this is a perfect example, speaking of perspective, Caroline, right? Like if you zoom out and think of it like on the larger, a lot of the SDRs want to become AEs. You're going to have to lose that mindset of like, I need it this week, this month, this quarter, and think long term. So yeah. I think that's so valuable.
I remember a quarter that Mo and I were selling together. I think this was 2021, Q1. Obviously, it doesn't still haunt me because I know the exact time that it was. But I called my mom, who has carried a sales quota her entire career. And I was like, I just don't know what I'm going to do. I just can't get enough of this pipeline to move. It's Q1. What am I going to do? She said, you're planting seeds. You're planting seeds. And like for her career, she's been in the same industry, selling to the same people for 30 years, 40 years. Don't check my math on that. But like, she knows. She's been in the game long enough. And we three, I think now, have been in the game long enough to know, like, with every interaction, you are planting seeds. Whether that person buys from you again or refers you to someone who needs your product, or, as I'm sure is the case with SDRs at Gong, wants to recruit you if you do your job well enough. Those kinds of seeds are what make a career. So it's really tough in the moment, but it's a really, really good lesson, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, we're coming up on time
already.
And I know we always like to ask our guests at the end the same two questions. So I'll ask the first one. The first question is, What was your first large commission check purchase?
Ooh. Oh my gosh. This is so embarrassing, but I got a really big commission check and I was walking down the street in New York and I saw this woman like a block in front of me who had the coolest sandals on. And I like walked quickly so I could go ask her what kind of sandals they were, and they were Prada. And I was like, well, I'm not buying Prada sandals. Like, that's just so not me. And then I went online and I saw how much they were. And I was like, you know what? I can buy Prada sandals. And I bought them and I love them so much.
I love that. That's not embarrassing. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's awesome. I love that you like did the like fast walk too to catch up with her.
Do you still have them?
I do. Oh yeah, I'll have them forever.
Prada sandals, they last a lifetime. That's so good. Well, you're in some transition at the moment, Maureen, but I'm curious, is there anything that you're selling, promoting, or want to share with our listeners at this point? Could even be maybe some advice for other folks who are in career transition or experiencing layoffs?
Yeah, I think, for every job that I haven't gotten or that I've left not on my own terms, like in hindsight, it was such a gift. Like I found something that was so much better than I could have imagined. And I think just being optimistic about like the future and being excited about the future is an important mindset. And when you're job hunting, I think about a couple of things. Like, first of all, I think about taking the approach like a salesperson, like setting up to have a couple of conversations a week. Maybe one of those turns into a second conversation, but then the second week you have to continue to fill the funnel and have those new conversations. So just like thinking about your pipeline for job hunting. And that is also very motivating for me to like think about it and just, pure numbers. I know that conversion rates happen and that you will find a new job. But also like with being unemployed or finding yourself unemployed, if you have the means to go job hunt in a cheaper country and take the time to just explore, try new things, play tennis, do things that you've always wanted to do that you haven't had the time for. It's just, a gift to yourself because you will find a new job and you'll find it quickly. And to be able to say like, during that gap, I accomplished all of these things and had fun doing it, I think will make you happy when you're back in that sales grind at the end of the quarter and have those memories to look back on.
That's amazing advice. Life advice, I think.
And it's so true. Like you always get back in the saddle way faster than you thought you would. And then you're like, why did I do that so fast? At least for me.
Yeah, it's amazing advice. Can you tell the listeners quickly, Mo, what you did the most recent time that you got laid off? Where'd you buy a ticket to?
Buenos Aires, and I went to the Taylor Swift concert with 60,000 Argentines, and it was the best decision ever.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So there's definitely a Taylor Swift theme in this podcast episode.
Unintentional, but there sure is.
How trendy of us. All right. Well, we had so much fun in this conversation with you, Mo. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your wisdom.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Very excited to be here.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Maureen, for joining us on Rep Matters.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Rep Matters, the podcast for sales professionals who become top performers. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow Rep Matters wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or access all episodes at marketersindemand.com/repmatters. See you next time.